Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest installment of the JungleRoar podcast, brought to you by the great folks at Prize Picks and CLNS Media. My pleasure to welcome back to the pod for the first time in a couple of weeks, Jay Morrison. He is now covering the Bengals and the NFL for SI.com, BengalsTalk.com. He is now a colleague of James Rapine and also does, as he normally does, great work with Paul Dehner Jr. on the Growler podcast. Jay, how you doing?
Doing great. Really looking forward to this new endeavor with James and writing for BengalsTalk.com. And we've known James for a number of years. He's a great guy. I'm really looking forward to being a colleague of his and looking forward to maybe doing some different things, writing some different types of stories. And it's going to be experimental for a little bit. I'd love to hear feedback from people. What do you want to hear? What do you want to read more of? What do you want to see more of? I'm open. I want to give the people what they want.
That is awesome. And you know what, Jay? You know where you can get that feedback? On the YouTube page, youtube.com/@JungleRoarPod. Leave your comments, folks. You heard Jay.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you want to see from Jay? Maybe new and different on the BengalsTalk.com site that maybe you haven't seen from Jay in the past. No one, and I mean no one, does a better statistical analytical breakdown of all the numbers regarding the Bengals and the NFL than Jay does. Jay, one number that I think Bengal fans were very pleased with was 34-24 Sunday, the final score of the Bengals' first win of 2024. I guess your biggest takeaways from that game?
I don't know if people were more pleased or relieved with that win.
I think a lot of fair. That's fair.
You can't be picky, but I think people were hoping that would be a little more convincing of a win. But my biggest takeaway, honestly, was the offensive line. And just, fourth time in the Burrow era, he hasn't been sacked. That's notable. The way they ran the ball, yes, Chase Brown is explosive and Zach Moss is a good runner, but there were holes. And third and goal, and they run the ball. They never do that down there. It's always pass. And Zack even said yesterday, if he left it up to Joe, Joe would have passed it in that situation. He called run. Joe stayed in the play. They plow it in for a touchdown. It was a big step forward for that offense. And it's not like the offensive line has been bad. They've been pretty good this year, but it was still notable, and notable for one gigantic reason, which is the first career start of Amarius Mims. We saw him get his feet wet in the Washington game after Trent Brown went down, but to see him out there for a full game, he made that one mistake again that he made when he gave up the sack against Washington, where he oversets too far to his right, gets beat on an inside move. It ended up being a sack against Washington. It ended up being an interception against Carolina. But those are kind of the growing pains that you have to live with a young guy. I think even Joe Burrow kind of not called him out, but mentioned him by name without being asked about him in the post-game press conference. That shows you where his head and where his confidence is with Amarius Mims. So that was my biggest takeaway, is just how well that group played.
You and I were in the locker room on Monday for the post-mortem after a first Bengals win, and we had the chance to talk to Chase Brown, and I asked him, how good did it feel to finally be able to finish off drives running the ball in the low red zone? And the smile came across his face and said, yeah, it feels really good. We know we can do it now. And to me, that confidence is one of the biggest things that the Bengals are going to need going forward, knowing that, of course, they can throw the ball in. And technically that swing pass, that swing play to Zach Moss right before halftime, that was a pass play, but it kind of worked a little bit like a run play. But the two runs by Chase Brown, low red zone, it demonstrates to the Bengals, to themselves, they can run the ball in.
Yeah, down there, which is crucial. And not just run it into the end zone from the low red zone, but you have to be able to run the ball in the red zone anywhere. You can't just let the defense know you can be sitting back there passing all the time. And I think that's a big thing. And the other thing with Chase Brown in this offensive line is he hasn't broken one yet. He feels like he's so close. Every time he touches it, it just feels like there's that one little burst. But in spite of that, even though he hasn't broke the long one, he leads the NFL right now in yards per carry. I mean, he's getting chunk runs. He hasn't hit the 30, 40, 50, 70 touchdown. Nothing like that really inflates an average. These are 12, 15, I think he had a 20-yard run
He did.
on Sunday.
He did.
That's big. When you that's what they've been looking for. That's why they moved on from Joe Mixon. You weren't getting that from Mixon, and that's the dynamic. Yeah, it's great if he can break one, and like he almost did early in that game, just got tripped up, and you get that long touchdown, the big highlight reel. But to do it over and over and over again, and always be a threat for a double-digit run, that's what they've been missing.
Yes, 15 carries, 80 yards for Chase Brown. That's a 5.3 average and the 2 TDs. 15 carries, 51 yards for Zack Moss, 3.4. And Burrow had the 1 carry for 10 yards. 31 carries, 141 yards, 4.5 yards a pop. That is sustainable. And if you do that over the course of the season, I think Zack mentioned this. I think Joe Burrow last week mentioned it after the game. I think he mentioned it. That if you can do that, you really are going to like where the Bengals offense winds up.
Yeah, absolutely. These defenses are going to play back, and they're not going to let T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase beat them deep. And if you can punish them underneath with the run game, that's what the whole point of having 2 backs back there with explosive ability is. And I went and I looked, and the last time the Bengals had 2 backs with at least 15 carries in a game, it's been a decade. It was 2014, a game with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. So that is the snap count was closer to 60-40 for Zack Moss, but the carry load, 15 each, that's ideal. That's what they want to see moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why, when you say who's going to be the lead back, well, it's going to depend game to game, maybe even situation to situation within a game. And I think that's good by those guys. That Ja'Marr Chase play to me is an all-timer. And, I said this to Skinny after the game on our JungleRoar Skinny Bengals post-game pod. When Ja'Marr Chase got to the sideline and he housed everybody and ran it into the end zone for 63 yards. I had definite 2021 Baltimore Ravens vibes in Baltimore when Ja'Marr outran the defense. That kind of play, to me, is a sign, maybe, just maybe, you get the run game going, there is going to be a chance for some explosives in the passing game as well. And you've got, an extraordinary receiver in athlete in Ja'Marr Chase to be able to carry that out.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, because the Baltimore one was a little different. The Kansas City one, where he caught that short pass and just ran away from everybody.
Correct.
That was that one too. And it was different because that was across the middle of the field. This was down the sideline. But you're right. I mean, that's explosive plays don't mean throwing over the top of the defense. You get a guy like that who can break a tackle or two and be gone. That's huge. And again, that play goes back to the offensive line. Burrow had all kinds of time to throw on that play, and he was able to kind of sit there and pat the ball and wait for Ja'Marr to come all the way across the formation and then hit him instead of right out of the break. And that way he was already moving away from a bunch of the defenders, and then he breaks 3 tackles and he's gone. And what I loved about that play too is early in that game, you see Joe Burrow limping around. It's like, oh, geez, he got stepped on. He was in a lot of pain. Mike Hilton is down on the field. It looks bad. He goes out. On that Ja'Marr touchdown, Joe Burrow sprints down the field, jumps, and does kind of the awkward hug, in-air hug. And it's like, well, obviously he feels good now. He can do that. Yes. And if you watch it, Mike Hilton is chasing Ja'Marr Chase down the sidelines. Like, well, I guess Mike feels good too. So that play just made, I think, a lot of Bengals fans feel good for multiple reasons.
I'll tell you another play that really made a lot of Bengals themselves feel great was Chris Jenkins Jr., the stop on Chuba Hubbard at the goal line, 4th and 1, to watch the whole Bengal sideline explode in jubilation. I sensed, being in that press box, being in that stadium, that they needed that boost of energy. The way the first 3 weeks had gone, the way some even self-doubt, I think, was starting to creep in. They needed to play like that. And you could tell from that moment on, even though, Carolina tied the game twice, 7-7 and 14-14, you could tell the Bengals were going to have a little more juice in the tank on Sunday.
Yeah, I thought it actually would be more of a catalyst than it was. I mean, Chuba Hubbard still had over 100 yards. They ran the ball on them. I won't say at will, but very successfully. And I did. I thought that was, as soon as that goal line stand, I was with you. I was like, oh, there's the turning point. That's what they've been waiting to see. And it was huge in the fact that it saved 7 points, and the game would have felt totally different if Carolina goes down and gets points on the first drive. But it is anytime you can get a goal line stand like that. And this wasn't working their way closer. I mean, they started first and goal at the 2, and there was only one pass. A great play by Dax Hill to break up the pass. Yes. The other 3 were run stops, just stoning the back right up the middle. And you mentioned it, Chris Jenkins. I thought he quietly played a really impressive game, and they need that. He's kind of thought of as more of a 3-tech, a pass rushing guy in there. But if he can play the run like that, and he only played 22 snaps, they were kind of feeling him out and seeing how he would react with the club on his hand. I think he's going to have a much, much bigger role against Baltimore. Number one, you need it because of the nature of that offense. But number two, I think he proved he can handle it. And this wasn't his debut. He played against Washington, but this one was significant. And 22 snaps. I wouldn't be surprised to see him be around 50 or so against the Ravens.
And BJ Hill warmed up before the game on Sunday, did not go, was not active again for a second straight week, just like Sheldon Rankins. And while Rankins, I think, will probably be out for a little while, at least a couple more weeks, I'm guessing here, but just, kind of reading the tea leaves from Zack Taylor on Monday, I think BJ Hill is going to make a run of it Sunday. And I think if they get BJ Hill back and Chris Jenkins Jr. plays the way he can play, and you're looking at Myles Murphy either this week or next week, whenever they decide that he's ready to go. Those are 3 big players along that defensive line that could contribute and really give the Bengals a different defensive look.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just getting Murphy back is going to let them give Sam Hubbard some time off. He's playing through an injury. He's not 100%. He played 79% of the snaps Sunday in Carolina. You don't want that. If you can get Murphy back and kind of get Sam down in the 50, 55 range, that would be ideal. I don't know about Rankins. I mean, they didn't put him on IR, so that's a minimum 4 game. He's already missed 2, so I would think at the time, maybe still now, they felt good about him in week 6 at the Giants. And Zack did say they'd get those guys out there and see, but he hasn't even been on the rehab field. BJ's been on the rehab field. He's been doing 3-game workouts. And so I would expect BJ to play this week.
That's what
but Rankins, I think not this week, but I think there's a good chance he could play in week 6. Otherwise you didn't really need the roster spot, but it still would be odd to have a guy miss 4 weeks when they could have just put him on IR.
Also, let's talk about the negative. The biggest negative that I think Bengal fans saw on Sunday was pretty obvious to everybody. Cam Taylor-Britt did not have a good game. And Zack Taylor used the term on Monday, not up to his standard. He's looking forward to Cam Taylor-Britt bouncing back. When Lou Anarumo spoke to us on Monday, he had, the same type of comments about Cam saying, look, if he's not playing well, we're going to put somebody else in there. And it wasn't necessarily in Lou's point of view, it wasn't a benching because he still played the rest of the game. Mm-hmm. It's just that he had to get other guys in there that he thought could do a better job and get Cam off the field and maybe give him some different perspective and reassess things. What were your general takeaways on Cam Taylor-Britt on Sunday?
Well, the first is that he took it the right way. Lou talked about it. He came up and gave him a hug walking off the field, said that's never going to happen again. So he wasn't saying, why'd you pull me? He knew it wasn't his best game. The second thing is, Cam's not a 5-6 year veteran, but he has a track record, and we've not seen that before. And so I tend to think it's more of a one-off, and it's a luxury if a guy is having a game like that, and you can go and get a DJ Turner who played really well in Cam's spot. I think guys don't just lose guys Cam's age don't just lose their skills overnight.
Right.
I think this is in his head. I think the comments about Xavier Worthy leading into the Kansas City game, Zack Taylor was not happy about those and talked to him. The comments about Washington and the college offense, he does it again the exact following week. He said he wouldn't take those back in the immediate aftermath of the Washington loss. But seeing how those blew up and how those were taken outside the building, how they were taken inside the building, was Zack Taylor again addressing him and saying, you can't be doing this. I think it was in his head, and I think he was trying to go out and prove something and maybe get out of his lane and try to
out of his
do
technique.
yes, and do too much. And
Right.
and it affected him. And it's a great lesson to learn for a young you have not one of the worst game of your career. Your team still wins. Your coach still believes in you. I still think Lou starts him this week. So I think it was it's not something that's necessary, but it can be a growing moment and something to a learning experience that, like Lou said, say less, do more. That's always the best way to go about it. I don't want Cam to like totally clam up and not talk to us because he's terrific. I don't think he was like, oh, here's a soundbite. These guys are going to like this. He was just being honest, and he was kind of taken back about how those comments were taken. So I think he'll be a little more cautious about what he says going forward.
In his defense, and this is where a lot of fans watching our podcast, and whether they watch the Growler, they watch JungleRoar, they watch James Rapine's podcast, which is very, very popular. A lot of fans think that we in the media sometimes take things either out of context or blow them up too big. And I do think Cam talking about the college offense, when he said nice college offense, I think that was interpreted to mean it's an insignificant offense that really you don't see in the NFL level. Well, you don't see it at the NFL level that much. And what you saw Jaden Daniels do is, very akin to what a lot of college offenses do. And the quarterback play was very similar to the way a lot of college quarterbacks play. And that's what he was trying to say without slighting Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury. He was trying to compliment Jaden Daniels and Kingsbury in saying they've got him in a system where he feels comfortable. It looks that way on tape. Instead, nice college offense is the takeaway you get from that quote.
Well, he did say they don't ask him to do too much before he said that. So that was kind of a little bit of a dig where, and that's what you want to do with a young quarterback. Keep it simple for him. And
even then, Jay, even then, if he says they don't ask him to do that much, that's a slight. I agree with you. But what he's trying to say is they have put him in a position where he can excel. Yeah. And it came out wrong, is what I, in my defense, my very poor defense attorney, and Cam Taylor-Britt. He's a big boy. He's in the NFL. He can speak for himself. I get all of that, but that's just my interpretation.
Yeah, and if you go back and if people think that you're trying to bait these players to say something like that, I think the question was, what have you seen from Jaden Daniels? That's not bait. That's a standard question to ask a defensive player. What have you seen from the opposing quarterback? And it was the same thing with Xavier Worthy. He's a rookie. He's a new guy in this league. And it was like, what have you seen from him? And Cam says, he's just a fast guy. You get your hands on him. That one was far worse. And then he goes out and gets beat for a touchdown early in that game. So, and I think that's where it starts kind of getting in your head a little bit. He did redeem himself with an incredible interception after that. But yeah, I just think he needs to maybe choose his words a little more wisely. And I fully expect him to stand there in front of his locker tomorrow and talk to us and not be cliche and short answers, but be a little more measured in his responses.
Well, it was interesting, Jay, and I'm sure you noted this. Zack Taylor mentioning that quote unquote, I'm sure you'll hear from Cam later this week talking about that. To me, is a message that, they've spoken with Cam Taylor-Britt. They don't expect him to clam up and hide. They expect him to keep addressing us in the media because that's an important part of communication during the week. Just don't be disrespectful to the opposition. That's the way I took it. You know who has a nice little running offense, to paraphrase Cam Taylor-Britt? Baltimore Ravens. Sunday night, Derrick Henry, 24 carries, 199 yards. It would have been 200 on the button if he doesn't fumble a ball into the end zone in the fourth quarter. I found that kind of ironic and hilarious. Of course, he had the 87-yard touchdown run on the first play from scrimmage Sunday night in their 35-10 win over Buffalo. Lamar Jackson, 6 carries, 54 yards. And Justice Hill, he is quietly becoming a terrific secondary back in their rushing offense. 4 carries, 18 yards. In total, Jay, 34 carries, 271 yards, 7.3 yards per carry. What in the world can the Bengals do to maybe cut that in half or even by, let's say, 40% and get it down to 4 yards a carry?
I don't know if they can. I think this is going to come down to just outscoring them and trying to get out in front early. If they can get a lead and do like they did in Carolina, score 4 touchdowns on 4 of the first 5 possessions, maybe not to that extreme. That's asking a lot against the Ravens, but go out there and repeatedly score. And we've seen this before. That Ravens offense and coaching staff will abandon the run. They did it in the AFC Championship game to everyone's amazement, and it cost them a trip to the Super Bowl. So if you can put some pressure on them by Joe Burrow and the offense continuing to play as well as they are, I think that's the best recipe for this defense. I don't know that you're gonna stop that offense. And they've done a good job against Derrick Henry in the past, but that's not standing next to Lamar Jackson. This is a totally different dynamic. And this Ravens team has legit receivers now. That was always an issue for a while. And I don't know that they can cut down that production of that offense. I think it's just gonna have to be a track meet if they're gonna win it, and they're just gonna have to outscore them.
How many years in a row have we heard from Zack Taylor? You know what Baltimore loves to do? Limit the possessions of the game.
Yeah.
Well, in one sense, maybe the Bengals do that on Sunday afternoon at Paycor and slow the game down a little bit. And like you said, get the lead and start limiting the times that Lamar Jackson can touch the ball. One other thing that we didn't talk about in the Carolina game on Sunday was the critical part of the Bengals going 2 for 1 around halftime. Scoring before halftime and scoring after halftime completely changed the perspective of that game. Maybe the Bengals need to do something like that here on Sunday afternoon, where they go 2 for 1 at some point of the game. Maybe it's around halftime. Maybe it's, getting a touchdown, a stop, and another touchdown or a field goal. Getting some type of packaging around a defensive stop could go a long way in giving yourself a chance to win.
Yeah, might be a lot to ask to do it 2 weeks in a row. I looked it up. The last time they scored on the last possession of the second half and the first half and first possession of the second half was 8 years ago in 2016 against the Eagles. Now they've scored on their final possession of the first half and their first possession of the second half, but there have been possessions in between where the opponent got the ball. To actually have the ball last and get points on the board with 1 second left in the half, as they did this time, and then to get the opening kickoff and to go down and score again, it's been since 2016. And they talk about it all the time. That's why you defer. You want that opportunity. And they've done field goal touchdown combinations before, but to go touchdown, it's pretty rare. And it would be huge. And I fully do expect that if they win the coin toss. For a while there, they wanted to go out and set the tone, and they were taking the ball, even a few years ago, even if they won the coin toss. I don't think that's going to be the case this time. If they win the coin toss, I think they defer and try to get that double dip again.
Even with Baltimore's ability to score almost at will on Sunday against Buffalo, that is a fascinating argument and debate to have going into that game. And they do usually discuss things like this on Friday and Saturday before the game, just for fans' information. Zack Taylor talks with his game management staff and the coaches responsible for that. To me, that's a fascinating discussion this week, because do you want to go down, score first in the game like they did against Washington? And that didn't work out great, obviously, because their defense couldn't get off the field and couldn't stop Washington. But they did score right away in that game and had a 7-0 lead. Maybe that did tell them. Maybe Sunday's game against Carolina, Jay, and the game prior against Washington indicated to them, even if we score first, we'd rather be able to defer and have the ability to possibly stop them and then have that opportunity around halftime.
Yeah, and think about it. If the game's 7-7 at the end of the first quarter, are you feeling better if you scored first and they came down and matched you and you're like, oh, okay, it's gonna be like this? Or are you feeling better if you let them have the ball first, they score, and you come back and you're like, okay, well, we can match them score for score. It's just a totally different vibe. Even though it's 7-7, it's the same score. It just, I think it's a different feel to go out and match the opponent as opposed to go out and score first and then have them match you.
Also, I want to ask you, Jay, about the special teams, because I know you pay particular attention to this.
Yeah.
Ryan Rico has been, I think, nothing less of sensational so far in his rookie year. And on Sunday in Carolina, his punt in the fourth quarter, pinning the Panthers at the 8-yard line. I talked to Tyson Anderson yesterday in the locker room about this. He said, those are the kind of punts we've been looking for, to pin teams back and really give our defense a chance, if not to get the stop right away, force the opposing offense to go the length of the field, in that case 92 yards for a game-tying touchdown. It really sets up the defense in a much, much better position late in the game.
Absolutely. And everybody looks at the 63 and the 57, the big leg and all that. But I thought that was his most impressive punt. And it was still a 50-yard punt that they downed at the 8-yard line. But that's it. That's what we saw. The little bit of inconsistency from Rico is, yeah, he's got a big leg, but he was sending balls into the end zone for touchbacks, and that kills the net. And you don't want that. You want the ball down there where either the guy's going to have to catch it inside the 10 and try to run it out, or maybe it hits and bounces and Tyson Anderson and some of the other guys can get down there and pin it even further closer to the goal line. So it was huge. I mean, Rico leads the NFL in gross punting average and net punting average. And right now, if his gross punting average of 58 yards per punt were to stand up, it would beat Kevin Huber's franchise record by 11 yards. It's just an incredible start that guy's off. He's a rookie. And
yeah.
That the whole reason, we thought this was going to be Brad Robbins gets healthy and then comes back and the competition kind of keeps going again. I even asked Zack about that early on, and he said, yeah, this isn't over just because Brad's on IR. And now it's over. I mean, Ryan Rico has won this job, and that's the whole reason that they didn't just cut Brad at the roster cut down day, because there was just that inconsistency that Rico had that always left a doubt in the back of their mind. Is he the guy? He's proven in 4 weeks that he's the guy.
I know you do this very, very well in press boxes before the game, like 90 minutes before the game, when special teamers are out there starting their warm-ups. And I noticed this on Sunday in Carolina. Rico was not having a good warm-up. Mm-hmm. He wasn't having a good warm-up from minus 50, meaning the Bengals end of the 50, Bengals end of the field, before the 50-yard line and punting deep. He wasn't getting any distance. And inside plus 50, when he was trying to punt there, he was trying to work on his, what we never call it anymore, coffin corner
yes.
punting and pinning teams back. And he couldn't get those inside the 10. And he was shaking his head. He was looking at Darren Simmons, and Darren Simmons, special teams coach, was looking at him and doing some, I think, I know I was a mile away. Obviously, I was in the press box, but trying, I think, to encourage him, give him some energy. But it's just fascinating to me, Jay, that a guy like that can have a rough it's like in the bullpen in baseball. Mm-hmm. You can have a terrible warm up in the bullpen, come out and just have great stuff and blow away the batters. To me, that's what it was like on Sunday for Ryan Rico. It was interesting to watch.
I mean, same thing with a 3-point shooter and a shoot around before a game. They can be clanking off the rim and you go out and you're just hitting everything. That's why you do it. That's why you have pregame warm-ups. It's not just getting the muscles loose. It's getting yourself back in the rhythm of doing what you need to do. And that is interesting that he struggled like that before the game. But the one I remember was, we were there at the end of 2022, the game in New England when Evan McPherson was missing everything. And I even tweeted out that he struggled.
Great call.
That didn't turn around. He struggled in that game. So it can go that way too. But I think that's great for a rookie to see that, the pregame warm-up's not going to define you, that you get out there, you work out the kinks, and you go have a really good game.
What do you have up on BengalsTalk.com, Jay?
Well, the most recent thing, I put a story up on Brad Robbins getting cut. I've got a report card from the game. I have a story on the offensive line and their improvement. I labeled it Joe Burrow gives 5 reasons why this team is in a good position. Well, those 5 reasons are the left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle. And I'll have more. I have some more stats and stuff later today. Dug into, can this defense turn it around? They are the 6th worst team in terms of points per drive allowed. I looked the last 10 years, teams that are through 4 weeks are in the bottom 5. How many of them climb out of that and make it to the top half of the league? Some surprising numbers there of the potential to turn things around.
James Rapine, and I have told him this, made a great hire in bringing you on board to SI.com's BengalsTalk.com. Jay, you bring it every single day, and not only do the fans appreciate it, we appreciate it on the beat because, believe it or not, we read other people's work on the beat, and that does help us add analysis and perspective on what we like to write as well. Jay, thanks so much for joining us on this episode, this edition of the JungleRoar Pod.
Thanks, Trags.
All right, he's Jay Morrison. You can follow him, as it says on his descriptor here on the video version of this podcast, by Jay Morrison. My name is Mike Petralia. You can follow my work on the X at Trags, Trags, of course, online, CLNS with a Y.com. Until next week, keep that jungle roaring.